Imagine a hospital room filled with silence so heavy it pressed against the walls, silence only broken by the faint beeping of machines and the muffled sobs of a father who had everything yet stood powerless, watching the life of his only daughter slip away. Doctors in crisp coats shook their heads, whispering words he didn't want to hear. Organ failure, no matches, her body's rejecting everything, but to him they were just swords twisting in his chest. He was Victor Hale, a billionaire CEO whose empire stretched across continents, a man whose signature could make or break industries, whose cold efficiency had turned him into both a feared and admired figure in boardrooms worldwide. Yet here, in this sterile room smelling faintly of antiseptic and despair, he wasn't the CEO, not a billionaire, not the titan of Industria. He was just a father, broken, desperate, begging for a miracle as his daughter lay pale and fragile on the bed. And here's where you, the viewer, must stay with me, because what happened next wasn't in any medical journal, wasn't something money could buy, wasn't even something doctors could explain. It was the spark of love and sacrifice from an unlikely man, a single dad with nothing to his name but his blood and his heart, and that spark would change not just the fate of the dying girl but the course of two families forever. It began when Daniel Brooks walked through the hospital's emergency entrance that night, cradling his own daughter Emily in his arms. His little girl, just 8 years old, had fallen off her bike and split her forehead open. Blood stained her shirt and her tears left streaks down her cheeks, but Daniel held her with the steady calm of a man who had seen worse because he had. A veteran, Daniel carried not just scars across his body but across his soul, having lost his wife to illness 2 years earlier, leaving him with nothing but Emily and a quiet determination to give her a better life. The receptionist took one look at him, disheveled jeans, tired eyes, a man who clearly didn't belong in the gleaming halls where the rich came for care, and almost dismissed him, until she noticed Emily's bloodied shirt and quickly waved him through. Daniel didn't know it yet, but stepping into that hospital that night was stepping into destiny. In another wing of the hospital, Victor Hale was pacing, hands clenched so tight his knuckles turned white, his board of directors calling him relentlessly about deals worth billions, but he didn't answer. His daughter, Lily, just 17, had collapsed a week earlier from a rare autoimmune disease. Her body was shutting down, and every specialist flown in, every treatment, every experimental drug had failed. "She won't make it through the night without a donor match," the chief physician finally said, his voice heavy. Victor slammed his fist against the wall. "I don't care what it takes. Find someone. Pay them. Do whatever it costs." But the doctor only shook his head. "Mr. Hulley, broken bar money can't buy what doesn't exist. The odds of a compatible match are 1 in millions." And that's when fate pulled Daniel and Emily into Victor's world. Emily had been treated quickly as stitches, bandages, a lollipop from a kindly nursee, and while waiting for discharge papers, Daniel overheard frantic voices in the hallway. He glanced over, saw a group of doctors surrounding a tall man in an expensive suit whose face was etched with desperation. Something about that desperation tugged at Daniel. He wasn't the kind of man to eavesdrop, but when you've carried soldiers bleeding out in your arms, when you've listened to last breaths whispered in desert sands, you know the sound of real fear. And Victor's voice carried that same sound. The word donor caught Daniel's ear. Something stirred inside him. He remembered when his late wife had needed blood, when strangers had lined up, when he'd prayed someone, anyone, would be the match. He leaned over to a nurse and asked quietly, "What's going on?" She hesitated but finally whispered, "The CEO's daughter, broken bar. She won't survive without a blood and tissue match. It's a broken bar, hopeless." Hopeless. Daniel hated that word. He looked at Emily, who was smiling bravely with a sticker on her cheek, her small hand gripping his. He thought of her almost dying once, how close he'd come to losing everything. And before he could second-guess himself, he stepped forward. "Test me," he said firmly. The nurse blinked. "Sarah," I said, "test me. You don't know until you try." There was something in his tone, and the unyielding steel of a soldier who didn't take no for an answer, that made them listen. Within an hour, results came back and the room froze. Daniel Brooks, a stranger, a single dad with no wealth, no power, was the closest match they had seen. Close enough to attempt the transfer. When Victor was told, he stormed down the hall, eyes blazing, expecting a scam, another desperate man trying to profit off his pain. He found Daniel sitting in the waiting room, Emily curled against his side asleep, his hand brushing her hair. Victor glared. "Why would you do this? What do you want? Money? A deal?" Daniel lifted his eyes slowly, tired but steady. "I don't want anything. I just don't want you to feel what I almost felt at burying your child." For the first time in years, Victor was speechless. He dealt with ruthless negotiators, with world leaders, with enemies disguised as allies, but never with a man who offered something priceless without asking for anything in return. The procedure was high risk. Doctors explained everything: a possible rejection, side effects, even death, but Daniel didn't flinch. Emily woke up once during the night and asked, "Daddy, are you gonna be okay?" He smiled, kissed her forehead. "As long as you're here, sweetheart." Then they wheeled him away. Hours passed like centuries for Victor, who sat outside Lily's room, staring at the ground, wrestling with the strange mix of gratitude and guilt. For the first time, he wasn't in control. The life of his daughter rested in the hands of a man who had no reason to help him. Finally, the surgeon emerged. "It worked," he said softly. "Her vitals are stabilizing,